in the front rooms of old?
My first memories of my parents' front room was that it was always locked. And the only time you would get into that front room was when a family friend came round. And they'd go into the front room and my mum would give us that look like, you're still not getting in here. And I think, you know what, we're going to get in that room. If it's the last thing, we're going to get in that room. So what we'd always do is like offer to make teas and bring it in. And sometimes that would get you to the door. And my mum would like meet us at the door and say, thank you, I'll take these.
We as children would be looking for the crack through the door, looking for the keyhole to see who it was and trying to eavesdrop on some kind of adult conversation.
But if there was a family aunt or a cousin in there, you get into the front room on the strength of them bringing you in, and then you could stay for a while. It was posh. It was almost like you walked, you know, Alice in Wonderland, like you'd walk in and go, wow, this is how they live.
You maybe had to dress up a bit and then be paraded in front of all the visitors. Oh, hasn't she grown? And look at her hair and all of that sort of stuff.
And I could see my mum sometimes looking at me like, you're not here long.
You conducted yourself in a very proper manner.
It was a bit like walking on eggshells.
Because you are in the front room and nothing untoward must happen in there, nothing vulgar or nasty or embarrassing. Getting up and dancing or even like wildly moving about or lots of laughing and carrying on, indecorous behaviour, that's not allowed.
It's just understood. You don't behave like that in the front room because it is the place where the external world has an eye into what the family is like.
You spoke a little bit more like that, you knew, and there was, because everything was proper and decent and nice, you know.
Just like that one, you know, Michael?
And then the conversation would get really interesting, such as my mum would say, I don't know why she married him. And we knew as children, this was very juicy information. Those kind of conversations were not for our ears. And so suddenly we would be told as children to go on some errand to the shop or go and check the peas on the cooker.
So once the talk was over and they'd done, oh, you grow big, look at you. You knew your time was up and you had to get out.
And then we would maybe come down, maybe sneak down later on and see people dancing very closely. And you wondered, why are they dancing so close? You didn't quite understand, but you knew it was kind of rude, you know, these two people dancing together.
But in the morning, there was always one person who would ensure that good family values were upheld in the front room.
The front room for my mum was the thing. She really loved that room and she just had the best furniture, the best carpets, the best pictures.
The father's there and presides over it when he's there, but the mother is the one who generates what the social order of this room is.
It didn't really matter what the rest of the house looked like. If the front room looked good, then you were decent people, you were respectability.
I think black women invested a lot of themselves in the front room as a way of expressing who they really were and their real values. And a lot of those values were kind of brought with them from the Caribbean, which were actually the opposite to those kind of racist stereotypes of black women as somehow flawed women. You know, respectable women didn't work, but black women had to work. So I think the front room became a way in which black women could express their respectability as working women, but also as good mothers. And the benefits of that labour could be expressed through buying lovely things for the home.
Every item, I think, in there represented a lot of hours of graft to get the money to go and buy those things. It wasn't a cheap, throwaway, disposable thing.
For my mum, that front room was her way of saying, this is my home, I can dress it up how I want, I don't have to share it with anyone, I can just be how I can have the home that I've always wanted to have.
You just want to work and get your money and go and buy things, you know, and make your place look nice and comfortable.
But when Mum was away, the mice would certainly come out to play.
Sometimes I could feel her at work thinking, I didn't lock the front room. And she would phone home and say, lock the front room and put the key in my bedroom. So once you knew it was open, it was like, oh, so it's open.
We would go and peep into the front front room when we weren't supposed to, because we weren't allowed to play in there.
Yeah, it was a bit like being let loose in a museum, I guess.
Strictly roots, now pop, no stop. Strictly roots. See me on the road and you not call out to me.
You definitely wouldn't want to leave any traces of the fact that you'd been there. Certainly moving things out of their place would be not very clever.
And as much as we tried to put the plastic on the sofas neat and the cushions back and lock the room, she could walk in and just feel by the temperature that people had been in here.
But as the second generation grew up, it wasn't only their own front rooms that they were curious about. They were starting to come into contact with a white world and all its strange habits.
Remember when we were in school, you were my playmates.
You know, you'd be at school and you'd hear English friends kind of answering back to their parents. In a West Indian black hole, you couldn't do that because you wouldn't have no teeth left.
I went to grammar school in Doncaster, and I was the only black girl in the school, so I had a wide range of white friends. And what was quite interesting, when they came to my home, I was allowed to take them into the front room.
We were going out, and this particular friend was white. We were going to another friend of ours who was black, and we arrived at my friend's home, and him not knowing, walked into the front room and sat down. And I sort of thought, gosh, you just don't do that. You just don't walk in someone's, especially with his mother being in there, and just sit down uninvited. And she said to him, "Do you mind getting up?" And she made him stand up again and did not allow him to sit down again, which made it even worse, So there he was, just kind of stood up, in this front room, sort of thinking, Christ, who are these people? When I went to my friends' homes, who were white, it was certainly a different feel. Their front room would have been much more access to my friends that were white, and there would have been less about sort of caring for the things within it.
English people, not only did they have the dog in the front room, the dog was on the sofa watching telly with them. You couldn't have done anything worse than if you let an animal, a dog, come into the front room. The place have to be sterilised. My God!
But by the 70s, the front room would be challenged by much more subversive elements than a dog. The television was to bring uncontrollable influences straight into the heart of the West Indian home.
Magic. Black magic.
A lot of West Indian people who could afford a television looked at anything that was going on television.